What's going on, Summoners? I'm Kangas, and I'll be your host for our patch 11.4 high elo tier list. This has been an exciting patch with changes that elite players have been absolutely begging for, and I can't wait to jump right into it. I know these changes are a bit catered towards the top players, and if you want to know about all the changes in the patch, go check out our patch rundown from last week. Now smash that sub button, and let's get into it.
We'll kick things off with the top lane. Renekton got a small nerf this patch, and while there's plenty of good blind picks, Renekton is getting singled out. His Q healing for minions has been reduced from 3 to 9 to 3 to 7, and the empowered healing down from 9 to 27 to 9 to 21. Gore Drinker was also recently nerfed, and adding these nerfs will probably drop Renekton down a tier. With less sustain, he's not going to be as powerful a pick in high elo, so we moved him into the A tier. Camille's also been nerfed this patch, and I'm certain a lot of high elo players are happy about this one. Her W's cooldown has been increased from 15 to 9 to 17 to 11 seconds. This isn't a giant nerf, but it's not a small one either. We expect Camille's win rate to drop a little bit this patch and have dropped her down to the S tier as a result. With a higher cooldown on her W, Camille will have less poke as well as sustain. Part of what makes Camille so strong is how she can outplay almost any matchup. A higher cooldown means that she'll get less free damage and have to go for riskier trades more often.
And with that said, I've got our question of the day. Which champion are you having the most trouble playing against right now? For me, regardless of whether I'm jungling or not, it's Nunu. I hate junglers who can lane gank because that's always the one angle that I'm not expecting them, and no matter how far you put him behind, he's still annoying. But let me know your answer in the comments down below. Now let's get back to the video.
Next on our list is Fiora. Her passive damage has been increased from 2.5% plus 4.5% per 100 AD to 3% plus 5.5% per 100 AD. While she's been underperforming a bit, this buff should bring her up a decent power level. We'll leave her in the A tier, but we gotta continue monitoring her performance. Compared to other top laners, it just doesn't feel like Fiora has that much agency. Dominating a team fight is a very straightforward way to take crucial objectives and snowball leads. Playing Fiora sometimes requires meticulous macro play, and there's a very large margin for error. Next, Tryndamere got buffed. His base AD was increased from 69 to 72. We moved Tryndamere into the A tier as a result of this, and the reasoning is that he's going to be an incredible stat check champion. After this buff, Tryndamere has so much AD that he should be able to beat the majority of his opponents in level 1 fights. That and the fact that Tryndamere has so much damage built into his kit means that players will have to consistently outplay him to beat him. As a result, we bumped him up to the A tier. Urgot has also gotten a buff this time around. The on-hit damage effectiveness on his W was increased from 50% to 75%. This is a pretty nice change, but it really doesn't help Urgot enough to move him up the list. And we've also got a couple of other changes to talk about as well. First, we moved Aurelia into the S tier as she's quickly climbed up to the top in high elo. She's a favorite among elite players because when she pulls ahead, she holds an amazing amount of agency over games. Her mobility, damage output, and even crowd control allow her to have so much impact in teamfights. Aurelia's ban rate has been slowly creeping up, illustrating she's perceived as a great pick. And the final changes we've made are that we moved Riven and Gnar into the OP tier. The buffs Riven received on patch 11.3 were absolutely insane. While slow to start, she proved that she was easily one of the strongest top laners in the game by the end of the patch. Our analysts knew Riven would be very strong, but her performance definitely exceeded their expectations. Gnar has also been doing pretty well, as he's proving to be that incredible blind pick that players can default to. Previously, that spot was held by Aatrox, but with all the nerfs to the Darkin, he's been replaced. So our OP picks for the top lane are Darius, Gnar, and Riven, followed up by Camille, Pantheon, Maokai, Ornn, Shen, Malphite, Aatrox, Cho'Gath, and Aurelia in the S tier. Next up, let's talk about the jungle. The jungle features a few small champion changes this patch. But aside from these, there's also been massive changes to the jungle role itself. We went over the full details of these changes in our patch rundown, but to summarize it all, you get rewarded less for clearing Krugs, Razorbeaks, and Gromp. With less XP and income, we expect to see big changes over the next couple of patches, and we'll continue updating you guys accordingly. Now, onto the champion changes. First off, Skarner has been dominating solo queue, so much so that we've actually had to move him up to the S tier. While his base HP has been lowered from 601 to 580 and his health per level from 90 to 85, he'll still be able to have the same impact as before. His ultimate just wins games, and near Aspire, Skarner deals an impressive amount of damage. We've been holding off on moving Skarner up because of his low play rate, but now that he's consistently performed well for several patches now, it's clear that he's worthy of the S tier in spite of the nerf. Just to let you guys know, if you're trying to improve, we're running a promotion over on ProGuides.com. If you use the code RANKUP2021, you receive a 20% off discount on a subscription. Make sure to check it out, but for now, let's keep talking about those jungle changes. Amumu has also been buffed this patch. The base damage has been increased from 75 to 155 to 75 to 175. Amumu has also gotten a small buff to his base HP, putting him at 615 health. After some massive nerfs, Amumu doesn't have the same impact that he did during the preseason. He's been severely underperforming in high elo, and even after this buff, we're gonna have to leave him in the C tier. Finally, a much needed buff for Lee Sin this patch. His Q's cooldown has been reduced from 11 to 7 seconds to 10 to 6. Lee Sin has been underperforming, but with this buff, we expect him to see a small surge in high elo. The reduced cooldown increases Lee Sin's damage output, but it also opens up windows to outplay enemies much more frequently. In a way, it's also a buff to his mobility, and even his jungle clear speed. We've moved Lee Sin up to the A tier following this buff. Now there are a few other changes we've made to the list, so let's go over those first. Right off the bat, Jarvan and Nocturne have been moved up to the B tier. They've been performing much better, with Nocturne receiving a huge buff back in 11.2. Given some time, players have played him more and found that he can be a pretty impactful pick with the reduced cooldowns on both of his Q and ultimate. While Jarvan isn't any stronger than before, we reevaluated his power and concluded that he feels a little bit stronger than the other C tier picks, and he deserves to be moved up. Finally, Graves has been moved down to the S tier, with Udyr taking his place. Graves is still a close contender for the OP tier, but Udyr is absolutely killing it right now at all ranks, including high elo games. The absence of Olaf following major nerfs has left room for Udyr to pop off. So our OP picks for the jungle are Kha'Zix, Karthus, Hecarim, and Udyr, followed up by Graves, Nunu, Evelynn, Kayn, Lilia, Kindred, Taliyah, Elise, Fiddlesticks, Ivern, Rek'Sai, Viego, Olaf, Nidalee, and finally Skarner in the S tier. Next up, let's talk about the mid lane. One buff this patch was to Talon, a pretty big one actually. His W's cooldown has been decreased from 9 to 9 to 7 seconds, and the outgoing bonus AD ratio was increased from 0.4 to 0.55. This buff is going to have a very high impact for high elo players. While the extra damage is nice, what's more important is the significant reduction in Talon's rake cooldown. At higher ranks, Talon will have an even easier time clearing waves, meaning that Talon will be able to pop off towards the end of the laning phase. With more wave clear, he should have way more opportunities to roam, pick up early kills, and snowball his lead. We already have him placed in the S tier, but we'll continue monitoring him because he might be insane. Veigar also got buffed. His Q's mana cost was lowered from 40 to 60 to 30 to 60, and his R cooldown decreased from 120 to 80 to 120 to 60. Although Veigar's late game is much stronger as a result of these buffs, we don't think he'll do that much better in high elo. The lowered mana cost means that Veigar will be able to farm more AP early on, but it takes far too long for Veigar to come online these days. Games go by faster in high elo, and it'll be really difficult for Veigar to have a meaningful impact in the current state of the game. So we're just leaving him in the C tier. To everyone's surprise, Katarina also got a buff. Her ultimate's on-hit damage modifier increased from 25% to a scaling 25 to 30%. The physical damage on each dagger also got buffed, increasing from 15% bonus AD to 16% bonus AD. Each dagger's damage also increases by an extra 3% for every 100% of your total attack speed. Finally, we have a lot of small adjustments that we're making to our tier list. First up, Azir and Jace have been moved into the B tier. Azir did receive a decent buff in patch 11.2, and gradually, he's been gaining some popularity in higher elos. While it does take a while to scale up, his power scaling is fast enough to merit him as a B tier pick. A mage like Veigar, for example, needs a lot more time and a lot more items to have an impact as Azir, who can contribute to his team with only 2. Jace has also been on the rise in higher elos, building lethality and also using Mana Mune. He's seen a decent amount of play recently. Next, Pyke and Renekton have been moved into the A tier, while Malphite has been moved down. After plenty of nerfs to Malphite and to Sunfire Aegis, he's just not the same absurdly broken pick as he was before. He's weak against magic damage, and his linear trading patterns are one high elo players can really take advantage of. On the other hand, Renekton's oppressive early game has led him to become a versatile blind pick and counter pick. Against melee mid laners, Renekton sees a ton of success, and he's definitely worth keeping in mind. Pyke, meanwhile, has recently seen a surge in the mid lane, and it seems to appear that an AD mid meta is beginning to develop. The final change that we've noted is that Twisted Fate has been moved into the S tier. By the end of last patch, he became the second most popular mid laner in elite levels of play. His ability to provide constant map-wide pressure with his ultimate proves to be extremely oppressive. He's also an acceptable blind pick. Not the greatest, but good enough, and you will always be useful STF. I mean, he's one of the champs that just provides pressure by existing in the game. So our OP picks in the mid lane are Anivia, Viego, and Yone, followed up by Fizz, Zed, Annie, Katarina, Galio, Talon, Seraphine, Kassadin, Yasuo, Pantheon, Echo, and Twisted Fate for the S tier. Next up, the bottom lane. Bottom lane features plenty of changes, so let's jump into it. Once again, Samira is getting the Aphelios treatment and is hit by some more nerfs. First up, Samira is no longer able to dash to allies with her E. Also, the dash speed on the ability has been reduced from 2050 to 1600. Meanwhile, her W's duration was lowered from 1 second to 0.75 seconds, and her Q's total AD ratio has been changed from 100 to 80 to 110%, while her passive's melee damage bonus ratio was adjusted from 7.5 to 3.5 to 9.5% total AD. Finally, her ultimate's cooldown has been increased from 3 to 8 seconds. These changes definitely weaken Samira in every aspect, so we've dropped her all the way down to the A tier. I know, even after all of that, she's still not trash. Next up is Kai'Sa, who's been OP for several patches now. Her Q base damage per missile was lowered from 45 to 110 to 40 to 100, meaning that the max single target damage has gone down from 101.25 to 147.5 down to 90 to 225, a much easier number to read. Meanwhile, the evolved maximum has been reduced from 168 to 412.5 down to 150 to 375. Extremely versatile, safe, and an incredible late game carry, there's just no reason to not pick or ban Kai'Sa. While this nerf does make Kai'Sa noticeably weaker, we still think that she'll be OP this patch just because of how versatile she is. Caitlyn, meanwhile, has actually gotten a pretty good buff. Her AD per level has gone up from 3.3 to 3.8, and her attack speed per level from 3.5 to 4%. Caitlyn is still underperforming a bit in high elo, but we think that this buff will help her find her footing. Attack speed on Caitlyn is really good. Since this targets her mid to late game, we don't think that the effect will be massive in high elo, so we'll still leave her in the B tier though. Jinx also received buffs this patch, as her base health was increased from 550 to 610. Riot made sure to reduce her health after giving her some other buffs, but has decided to revert that very nerf. We anticipated Jinx popping off in high elo last time, and we moved her into the A tier. With this buff, we're pretty sure that she'll find plenty of success this time around. Please people, just try her out, she's good. Another champion who got buffed was Varus. His W active bonus damage has gone up from 0 to 50 to 0 to 80% on a charged Q. As a result, the maximum value was increased from 9 to 21% to 10.8 to 25.2% of his target's missing HP. This is a small buff, so we'll still leave him in the C tier for now. The final changes we made to the list are that we moved Seraphine into the OP tier, and Miss Fortune and Senna into the S tier. Seraphine's shift speaks for itself. Even though Moonstone Renewer has been nerfed, the champion herself remains incredibly potent. With incredible utility and scaling, Seraphine retains a significant amount of impact in games and can also flex into either the mid lane or be played as a support instead. As a bot laner, she's pretty unique because she's still a utility bot. Supports that act as carries such as Senna do especially well bot lane with Seraphine. Miss Fortune has been moved down to make room for Seraphine, while Senna has been moved up to reflect her recent surge in popularity. High elo players really like those versatile picks. Just like Seraphine, Senna can provide a decent amount of utility as well. Of course, not as much as a pop star, but considering that she's a marksman that also outputs excellent damage, it's still an impressive amount. So our OP picks for the bot lane are Jhin, Kai'Sa, and Seraphine, followed up by Ezreal, Vayne, Miss Fortune, and Senna in the S tier. Finally, let's wrap things up with support. Hey look, it's me. Let's talk about Braum this patch. His ultimate's cooldown was reduced from 140 to 100 to 120 to 80 seconds. One of Braum's major issues is that he doesn't have his ultimate up often enough. Whether it's for early game dragons, to fend off dives, or even in late game teamfights, not having your ultimate ready is a big deal. This one's a really nice buff to address Braum's ridiculously long cooldown. Although he's been faltering a bit, we'll leave him in the A tier as a result of this buff. And the most annoying silence user in the game also got a buff. Soraka was buffed this patch, but thankfully, it was just her Q. To compensate for the nerfs to Moonstone Renewer, Soraka got buffs to ensure that she doesn't suffer too much. Her Q's bonus movement speed was buffed from 15 to 25 to 20 to 30%, and her W's base heal from 90 to 230 to 100 to 240. Overall, Soraka's early to mid game healing remains about the same, while her late game healing is slightly stronger than before. The added mobility from her Q will make her a little harder to catch, but we still think she belongs in the C tier for now. The only two changes we have to note are that we moved Maokai down to the A tier and Pantheon down to the C tier. Rip my top two champs. We've continued monitoring their performance and have concluded that they're just valued a bit too high right now. Pantheon support fell off very hard last patch, and we've updated his placement as a result. Maokai's still a pretty good support, but doesn't feel nearly as impactful as the other S tier picks, so we adjusted his placement accordingly. So our OP picks for support are Leona, Thresh, and Rel. While there are potential upcomers like Bard, thank God, we think that the nerfs to Moonstone Renewer will make these three champions stronger than before. Following them in the S tier are Lulu, Bard, Morgana, Nami, Janna, Alistar, Nautilus, and Seraphine.
And that'll wrap up our high elo tier list for patch 11.4. Thanks so much for your support. We really hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to continue supporting us, hit that sub button, like the video, and join our Discord through the link in the description. Until next time though, best of luck on the Rift, stay hydrated, and I'll see you in the next one.